as expected from an elf. He plunges his sword into its head. The elf asks that neither poison nor paralysis work on him, and also his skills are the same as those of the local monsters. Rude proudly asks how to explain everything. She falls to the ground and he asks if the paralyzing scales really did affect her. The elf with beads of sweat running down her face says that something is different. She holds her staff in her hand and says that first they need to get out, and then she will tell him everything. After some time in the forest, they are sitting under the leaves of a tree. The elf girl with a smile on her face says that it is much better outside. Before she begins to explain the situation, she needs to introduce herself, and she says her name. Alicia says that she is an adventurer. Rude, with surprise on his face, asks loudly if she is really that same Alicia the Emerald Wind. She, with a smile on her face, asks if he has really heard of her. He loudly says that Alicia is from that S-rank team from the Kingdom of Lydia's Azure Train. Only, if he remembers correctly, something happened to the Azure Trail. She says with a thoughtful face that it was 5 years ago, and the monsters crushed them. That day, they went out to fight against a monster of the deepest S rank called the Labyrinth of the Abyss. Their leader died in that battle. Another member of the team retired due to injuries sustained. Another was swallowed up by the labyrinth itself. Alicia lowers the fabric of her dress a little and a mark is visible on her skin, with a pink light coming from it. She says that she also couldn't go out without getting injured. Rude is on one knee and loudly tells her to stop and asks what she's doing. He looks at her with confusion. Alicia shows her mark and says that it's a curse that has been on her ever since. A curse that lowers her level. Rude, with a surprised look on his face, says that he's never heard of such a thing. She holds her hands on the dark energy that is taking over her body and says that she didn't know about it either. She tried to remove it in many ways, but all she could do was slow down its progression. Those bounty hunters knew this very well and they wanted easy money. She would die anyway once her level dropped below 0. But she couldn't stand being at the mercy of such people. Rude, with a surprised look on his face, says loudly that it's a curse. It seems he can help remove it. He takes out his guild card and uses the substitution skill. It allows him to take on the injuries and debuffs received by the selected target. Rude says that they need to try something. He looks at Alicia and says that she should not resist the skill he is activating now. She responds with agreement. Rude puts his hand on her shoulder, and a bright pink light begins to emanate from his hand. This is the substitution skill. Alicia looks at him in surprise and wonders if her curse is transferring to him. She says loudly in horror that she shouldn't do that. The curse will just transfer to him if he continues. Rude says with a smile on his face that it's okay, just trust him. He stands there, and behind him is a huge black monster covered in a pink aura. Alicia looks at it in horror. Rude closes his eyes and stands there with a smile on his face. He has activated the unique skill of debuff cancellation. The monster behind Rude broke into pieces due to the piercing yellow light. He looks at his hand and with a smile on his face thinks that it seems to have worked. Alicia with a surprised face asks what was just that. Rude says that she should check her status. She opens her stats and sees that her level is 43. Alicia with an embarrassed face says loudly that this can't be, her curse has been lifted. He clenched his hand into a fist and with a smile on his face says that this is his unique skill of debuff removal. So he thought that it should work against the curse too. Alicia asks if he is an idiot? To risk so much for the first person he meets. She, with tears in her eyes from joy, loudly says that she is grateful to him. Rudd, with a smile on his face, looks ahead and puts his hand on her shoulder. Some time later, under the evening sky, there is a restaurant. Alicia puts a wooden mug on the table. She, with a happy face, loudly says that it is cheap here, but at the same time the drinks are very tasty. And Rude knows a lot about choosing places. He, with a drop of sweat on his face, agrees and gives a thumbs up. Rude thinks that they were not even allowed into one place. He looks at Alicia and asks if she will be okay if she drinks so much. Just a couple of hours ago, she was badly injured. Alicia, with a smile on her face, looks at him and loudly says that she is recovering. She asks how one cannot drink on such a wonderful day. Rudd, with a calm look, drinks the drink and asks what she intends to do next. Alicia says that, to be honest, she would like to know a little more about him. She rests her head on her hand and asks him calmly how he decided to become an adventurer. He goes into his memories and says that the village he lived in was attacked by a monster. Because of those monsters, his family and friends died. But then, an S-rank adventurer suddenly appeared. He kills the monsters with a smile on his face and saves Rude. He will never forget his majestic appearance at that moment. Rude began to dream of becoming like him one day, so that he could save people too. Returning from his memories, he says with a smile on his face that this is his goal. Alicia looks at him and says that this is a wonderful goal. Rude asks that she will not even laugh. She holds a mug in her hands with a wide smile on her face and says that she herself dreamed of becoming an S-rank adventurer, even higher. Alicia planned to become even stronger until she was cursed. She is sure that her companions are still somewhere in the depths of the abyss labyrinth. Whatever the outcome, she wants to try to defeat that monster again. But right now, they don't have enough strength to achieve their goals. Alicia extends her hand to him and asks how about teaming up. He looks away and says he can't. Suddenly, an unknown person grabs Alicia's hand. Rude looks up and sees two happy guys. One of them says with a smile on his face that he has a really cute girl drinking with him. He seriously wonders if these are the idiots who beat him up in the restaurant. They look at Alicia and ask why she needs that boar. It would be better if she went with them. Rude grabs one of them by the shoulder and tells him to leave her alone. The guy grabs him by the clothes with displeasure and loudly tells him that he's an idiot. Alicia gets up from the table and says that they need to stop. This is a tavern, don't they know? She says with a big smile on her face that if they want to fight, they need to compete in who can outdrink the other. They drink beer for a long time and happily, until two guys pass out. Alicia says with a satisfied face that she won. Rude looks at her with a smile and gives her a thumbs up. They lean against the wall and he says that she held up well for someone who drank half a liter before the competition. Alicia looks at him with a dissatisfied face and says that he is her benefactor after all. She could not just watch when her benefactor was being poisoned. She falls on Rude's chest and falls asleep. He says with a smile on his face that there is nothing to be done about it and touches her shoulder using the substitution skill. Alicia wakes up in surprise and Rude says that he has nullified her hangover. She grabs his hand with a satisfied face and loudly says that first the curse and now the hangover. What a wonderful skill he has, they should definitely form a team. Alicia goes ahead and says that this is great, because now they can continue drinking. Rude looks at her with beads of sweat on his face and tells her not to get too drunk. She looks at the sign with a special dish and says that it is a pity that they cannot try it. The tavern owner in an apron looks at her and says that the places where they caught Barnuma are occupied by some kind of monster. He sent requests to the guild, but most of the adventurers are busy with work. The man looks at them and asks if they would like to take on this job. After some time at the Barnuma fishing grounds, they are sailing on a sailboat and looking ahead with smiles on their faces. Alicia loudly says that they need to get rid of this monster and try the special dish. Rude clenches his fist and closes his eyes, agreeing with her words. He looks away and sees someone splashing around in the water. Rude says with a smile on his face that they found it. This is the monster the tavern owner was talking about. They look down with frightened faces, seeing many underwater monsters, and think that this can't be. Rude uses his skill and learns the characteristics of the fish. One of them opens its mouth, and a blue beam comes out of it. He stops the beam with his sword that breaks out of the water. All the Jernebs open their mouths and attack them. Rude stops the beams with his sword with a frightened face. He thinks that this is just a wall of fire, and continuing to stand still is not an option at all. Rude crosses his arms trying to hide his face and jumps into the water. Alicia with a surprised face covers it with her hand from the splashes of water. He dives into the water where there are many Jernebs. Rude with a smirk on his face loudly tells them to swim here. All the monsters with open mouths swim up to him. He holds his hand from which yellow lightning comes out and uses the skill lightning cover. All the Jernebs get hit by the skill. Alicia looks at the sea and sees that the monsters started to float to the surface. Rude swam to the surface and inhaled air. Alicia is sitting in the boat and loudly calls him. He loudly says that everything is fine and thinks that there really are still freaks in the water. Those in the depths. But why don't they attack? Are they waiting for the moment, or are they protecting something here? Rude raised his hand and loudly says that he needs to dive deeper to find out what is going on here. He asks if she doesn't mind. Will you do one thing for him? Alicia with surprise on her face looks forward. After some time, a rope is tied around Rude's waist while he swims deeper. He thinks he figured it out right away because they don't attack, and they don't run away either. They're protecting something here. Rude looks at the bottom of the sea with a surprised expression and sees an unknown monster with many tentacles. He uses his appraise skill and learns the characteristics of the tentacles. Rude wonders if it's some kind of huge sea anemone or a hermit crab. Part of the tentacle's tentacle detaches and becomes a journeyab. He wonders with a surprised expression, so it's the one that breeds the journeyabs? If he doesn't kill it, there's no